The late afternoon sun shone over the busy streets of Atlanta, bringing everything to life with its golden glow. In the middle of all the noise and people, Olivia, a black woman who had become one of the city's youngest billionaires, slipped quietly into a small coffee shop tucked between storefronts. She wore jeans and a simple sweatshirt, hoping to blend in and just be another face in the crowd for a few minutes. Even though her name showed up in the headlines all the time, she cherished these rare moments where nobody pointed or stared, and she let herself breathe, surrounded by people lost in their own worries. But her sense of calm was short-lived. The steady tap of boots on the pavement outside caught her attention, making her heart beat faster. Soon, a heavy-set police officer entered, Officer Curtis, someone everyone feared for his harsh attitude. He scanned the room with hard eyes, and when his gaze landed on Olivia, his lips curled in a smirk. She felt the old tension rise in her shoulders, recognizing the familiar chill that always seemed to fill the room when he appeared. She knew this silent judgment would quickly turn into something much more open, and her quiet moment of relief was already slipping away. Officer Curtis made his way over to Olivia's corner table, his presence almost filling up the little shop on its own. He stood over her, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Didn't expect to see someone like you around here," he said, loud enough that a few people sitting nearby turned nervously in their seats. "This neighborhood's always been known for good folks, you know." His words carried more than just suspicion. They were meant as a warning that she didn't belong, that she should think twice about making herself comfortable. It was not the first time Olivia had heard that kind of talk, but it still hit her, in the gut, every time. Inside, fear tried to bubble up, but she pushed it down and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm just having coffee, officer. Nothing illegal about that," she replied, steady and clear. She gripped her cup a little, tighter, her knuckles turning white, but her voice never shook. The other customers avoided looking at them. An uncomfortable silence grew, thick as Atlanta's summer humidity. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Olivia was aware of how easily things could spiral out of control in a situation like this, but she was determined not to give Curtis any reason to escalate the confrontation. Curtis leaned in just a little closer, his big hand resting ominously near his belt, where his holster sat. "You know, folks need to learn how to respect the law in this neighborhood," he said, his voice lowering. The threat was clear in the way he shifted his stance, blocking Olivia's path to the door. Several people behind the counter froze, mid-motion, unsure if they should step in or stay quiet. Curtis's fingers tapped against his belt, drawing attention to his gun. Not pulling it, but making sure she got the message. The air grew heavier with each second, and the quiet hum of the shop faded into the background. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs, but her eyes stayed locked on Curtis's face. She remembered every lesson from her years back when she'd struggled to prove herself. Every moment someone tried to intimidate her, every time she'd been told to step aside. Those experiences had shaped her. She kept her voice calm, her hand still visible above the table. "Officer, I'm following the law. I've done nothing wrong. I'm not leaving because I don't have to." Even with her fear rising, Olivia wasn't about to let Curtis think he had control. The empty sidewalks outside told her there would be no witnesses if things got worse, but she was determined not to back down. The tension in the coffee shop reached its peak when Curtis suddenly barked out an order. "Get up," he growled, and before Olivia could respond, he grabbed her arm with a grip that sent a jolt of pain through her shoulder. His touch was rough and dismissive, as if he believed he could act any way he pleased and face no consequences. Around them, the other customers shrank back in their seats or stared down into their coffee, trying to disappear. There was fear in the air, but not enough courage for anyone to intervene. Curtis's face was set in a sneer, and the look in his eyes wasn't just about authority. It was about power, about making sure Olivia knew she was nothing in his eyes. Through the sting in her arm, Olivia's voice stayed steady. She took a deep breath, swallowing down the urge to cry or shout. Giving in to fear would only prove Curtis right, and she refused to let that happen. All those years fighting to be seen and respected in a world that wanted her to stay quiet had taught her something important. Now, more than ever, Olivia was determined not to shrink away in silence. She set her jaw and met his gaze with unwavering resolve, daring him to see her strength. Just as it seemed Curtis might go even further, a firm voice cut through the thick tension, echoing from just outside the shop's open door. "Let go of her, right now." The sound was sharp and impossible to ignore. Both Curtis and Olivia turned to see a tall man, probably in his 40s, standing at the entrance with his phone already recording. His name, as Olivia would later learn, was Michael, and until that moment he had simply been a stranger passing by on his way home from work. Michael's arrival shifted the mood in an instant. People behind the counter suddenly looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. Even Curtis, who had been so sure of his control, paused with a look of annoyance and surprise. He loosened his grip but narrowed his eyes at Michael, trying to steady his nerves and reclaim his sense of authority. "Step back. This is official business," Curtis snapped, his tone defensive. "You need to mind your own and not meddle in police matters." But Michael didn't budge. He remained right at the door, filming steadily, his presence sending a clear message. There were witnesses now. The crowd inside seemed to grow bolder, realizing the situation had changed. Michael held his ground, not intimidated by Curtis's warning. He looked right at the officer and said, "I'm not leaving. I see what's happening here, and I'm not going to stay quiet about it." His voice was steady, and the way he stood sent a message that he would not be scared off. Olivia felt a wave of relief washing over her, something she hadn't expected in the middle of that tense moment. For the first time since Curtis walked in, she knew she wasn't standing alone. Michael's eyes met hers for a second, and in that look, she saw that he understood exactly what was going on. Curtis hesitated for a moment. The pressure of having a witness, and one with a camera at that, was more than he had planned for. When he set out to patrol that day, reluctantly, his fingers unclenched from Olivia's arm. His face burned with anger and humiliation, though he tried to cover it up by threatening, "This isn't over. You both better watch yourselves." The air in the shop was still thick, but now there was something different, a kind of relief among the customers, and a flicker of hope for Olivia. With Michael standing by her side, the odds finally felt a little more even. The chaos in the shop barely had a chance to settle before the sound of another police car's siren pierced through the moment. Within minutes, 2 officers stepped. Inside, their faces firm and unreadable as they looked over the scene. Without asking much, one turned to Olivia and said, "You need to come with us to the station." They spoke with such finality that it was clear they were not open to discussion. Michael quickly stepped forward, trying to explain what had actually happened and that Olivia had done nothing wrong, but the officers ignored him, their eyes trained only on Olivia. Realizing there was no way to talk her way out of this, Olivia nodded quietly. She knew better than to argue or resist. Experience had taught her the cost of losing her composure in situations like this. She looked back at Michael, trying to say thank you in a glance. Michael promised her loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'll call a lawyer right away. You won't be alone, Olivia. I'll make sure of it." That promise helped steady her nerves as she walked out between the officers, head high, determined to get through whatever was coming. Even in that difficult moment, having someone on her side made all the difference. Inside the police station, everything felt harsh and unwelcoming. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the whole Place smelled strongly of cleaning fluid, making it clear this wasn't somewhere meant to make people feel comfortable. Olivia was led down a hallway into a small, bare interview room. The door shut behind her, and the noise of the station faded away, replaced by a heavy silence that made her anxiety grow with every heartbeat. She sat on a cold metal chair, facing a blank table, with nothing but the clock ticking on the wall to keep her company. Sitting there, Olivia felt the weight of what had just happened pressing in on her. But instead of letting fear take over, she focused on memories from her childhood, days when things had been just as hard, if not harder. She remembered long nights spent alone after her mom's shifts, the times when she'd had to stand up for herself on the walk home from school. Those tough moments had taught her to lean in when life pushed back. As she waited, every minute felt like another challenge, but she was determined not to let the cold walls and uncertainty win. She kept her spine straight, silent but strong, refusing to give up. The door to the interrogation room creaked open, and Curtis entered, his uniform as crisp as ever, but now there was a forced chill in his smile. He paced back and forth in front of Olivia, hands behind his back, like he was putting on some sort of performance. "You know," he began, his words carefully measured, "people like your friend Michael come and go. They play hero for a minute, but in the end, none of it matters." Every sentence was loaded with implied threats, meant to shake her confidence. He leaned in close, lowering his voice. "Intervention or not, nothing's changed here. You're going to learn who really calls the shots." Olivia met Curtis's eyes without blinking. Inside, her heart pounded, but she let none of that show. Instead, she just answered calmly, her voice steady even in the cold room. "No matter what you say or do, this is just the beginning. You don't control what comes next." For a moment, they sat in silence, the tension settling like dust. It was a silent standoff, but Olivia refused to look away. She could still feel the fear, but now it fueled her insistence on not backing down. She would not let Curtis intimidate her into silence. Before Curtis could fire off another remark, the door swung open again. This time, it was a woman in a tailored navy suit, her posture straight and confidence obvious from the moment she entered. Next to her stood Michael, who shot Olivia a reassuring look. The woman introduced herself as Rachel Evans, Olivia's new attorney, and her voice left no doubt that she meant business. With Rachel and Michael in the room, the mood changed right away. The cold, oppressive feeling started to lift, and a sense of hope slowly crept in. Rachel faced Curtis first, her gaze unwavering as she reminded him that Olivia had the right to legal representation and dignity. "We will not tolerate any mistreatment while my client is in this building," she said, her words strong and direct. Curtis, caught a bit off guard, mumbled something under his breath but stepped aside. Then Rachel turned to Olivia, her tone warmer. She encouraged Olivia to share everything that had happened, making it clear that her story mattered. "You are not alone in this," Rachel promised, "and we're going to make sure those responsible are held accountable." For the first time since she'd been brought to the station, Olivia felt certain that she had a real chance to fight back and be heard. As Olivia began telling Rachel everything that had happened, her voice trembled at first. But then she found her strength. She described Curtis grabbing her in the store, the things he said, and how powerless she had felt in the moment. Talking about it brought back the fear and frustration, but she pushed through it, knowing she finally had someone in her corner. Rachel wrote down every detail carefully, barely looking away from her notepad. Each fact, every word, felt important, like ammunition for the fight they would have ahead. It was obvious that Rachel was already planning the next steps, asking for security footage, questioning the officers involved, making sure the truth came out in court. Through it all, Michael sat next to Olivia, hanging on every word. Seeing her speak up gave him an even stronger sense of purpose. He kept thinking of all the times he had seen people in his city treated unfairly and decided right there that he would not back down, no matter how tough it got. By the time Olivia finished telling her story, the three of them, Olivia, Rachel, and Michael, felt like a real team. Each person brought something different to the table, but together they were united by the same hope, that things could finally change. As Rachel finished making notes, she looked up and spoke in a calm but steady tone. She told Olivia and Michael that Curtis, the officer who had confronted Olivia, had actually been the subject of several complaints in the past. Yet every time, the cases were quietly closed and nothing stuck. No one had managed to really challenge him or the system that protected him. "This time is different," Rachel said, glancing between them. "You have witnesses, security video from the store, and your statement. We finally have a chance to push back and make people pay attention." Olivia let those words sink in. For a moment, her nerves fired up again, and the room felt just a little smaller. She realized she was standing up not just for herself, but for so many others who had been pushed down and ignored. The thought scared her and gave her strength at the same time. As she nodded, she made a silent promise to keep fighting, no matter how long or difficult the road ahead would be. She looked at Michael and Rachel, feeling their support, and knew she was not alone. What started out as a personal ordeal was now becoming something bigger, a chance for real change. Soon, word of Olivia and Rachel's lawsuit began to spread all over the city. Local newspapers ran stories with photos from that same police station, and soon after, social media was filled with threads, opinions, and even video clips from news reports. In a matter of days, the situation had become front-page news, with people everywhere talking about what happened. Some messages showed lots of support, talking about how brave Olivia was for stepping forward. Others, though, were less kind, questioning her motives or saying things would never change. With every new article or notification, the pressure on Olivia grew. She read through dozens of comments, some warm and cheering her on, others just mean and dismissive. It would have been easy to let the negative words get to her, but instead, Olivia started thinking back to her childhood in Chicago, where she had first learned what it meant to keep going in the face of tough odds. She remembered neighbors who helped each other out, and all the times she scraped by on her own. That old grit started to rise up again, reminding her that quitting was never really an option. Even under this much scrutiny, Olivia decided to keep pushing forward with everything she had. The morning of the press conference arrived, and Rachel took Olivia aside in a quiet room just off the main lobby of the old courthouse. Rachel had a folder filled with notes and potential questions from reporters. She looked Olivia in the eye and said, "Today is not going to be easy. Some of the media are going to try to trip you up. There will be tough questions and even attempts to make you look bad, but remember, we are not here to show off. We are standing up because this is about real justice for you and for everyone who has been ignored for too long." She encouraged Olivia to listen carefully, take her time, and always bring the conversation back to what really matters. Just before they went out to face the crowd, Michael joined them and put a hand on Olivia's shoulder. He reminded her that their team had her back every step of the way. Researchers, friends, witnesses, and even strangers who believed in them. The group exchanged a few determined nods, knowing things were about to get difficult, but feeling stronger together. The air was thick with tension and nerves, but there was also a sense of deep connection and trust that carried them forward as they stepped into the hallway, ready to face whatever the day would bring. As the doors opened, the room filled with reporters, camera crews, and bright lights. Olivia took a steady breath and stepped up to the microphone, her hands only shaking a little. Rachel stood just off to the side, giving her a small nod of encouragement. The air felt tense as Olivia began to speak, but her voice came out strong and clear. She explained that she was not standing there for recognition or personal gain, but because everyone deserves respect, no matter where they come from. She said plainly that her fight was about dignity and bringing an end to people in power thinking they can get away with abusing others. For a long moment after she finished, the room was completely quiet. Reporters just looked at her, and even some cameras seemed to pause. It was clear her words hit hard, landing with real weight in that old Chicago City Hall. Then, as the questions began flying, some challenging, some supportive, Olivia kept her composure. When someone tried to accuse her of chasing fame, she answered straight, saying it was never about attention, but about justice for those who had been shut out and ignored for so long. As the conference continued, Olivia saw attitudes shifting. Respect for her grew in the eyes of many, and people started to see her as a new symbol of standing up against what was wrong. As the press conference wrapped up, and most of the crowd began to drift toward the exits, another figure in uniform stood nearby, watching Olivia carefully. His name badge read Officer Ethan Foster, and he carried himself with the precise, careful steps of someone used to following the rules. Olivia, Rachel, and Michael noticed him standing a bit apart from the reporters. Ethan's jaw was tense, and his eyes darted around as if searching for the courage to step forward. After a moment, he took a deep breath and walked over to the group, quietly asking if they would talk with him away from the cameras. They found a quiet hallway near the back of City Hall. Once out of earshot, Ethan lowered his voice. Without much preamble, he admitted that he had seen Curtis abuse his authority more than once over the years. Each time, he had stayed silent, afraid for his job, worried he might be targeted for speaking out. I kept my head down and convinced myself someone else would say something, he confessed, looking at the floor. But hearing you today, Olivia, I realized I cannot keep quiet anymore. He promised to testify with everything he had witnessed, finally stepping onto the side of justice, determined to break free from fear. Ethan's decision to step forward changed everything for Olivia and her group. Finally, there was someone willing to tell the truth from inside the police force, and that made the whole case stronger. Until now, it had mostly been people from the outside pushing for justice, but having Ethan on their side showed this problem was bigger than anyone had admitted. Rachel thanked him sincerely, letting him know just how much courage it took to go against his own colleagues. She said, "It is people like you, willing to put everything on the line, that give this movement real power. Without insiders willing to speak up, real change is almost impossible." For Olivia, all of this hit home in a way nothing else had. She felt tears stinging her eyes, not of fear or frustration, but from realizing that her actions had actually given others hope to take a stand. Watching Ethan quietly brace himself for what was coming, she understood that the story had moved beyond just her. Now, Michael, Rachel, Ethan, and others were coming together for something much bigger. They were all in it together, bound by a shared purpose and a new, strong sense that they could not only challenge the abuse, but maybe even change how the whole system worked. When the trial finally started, the old courtroom in downtown Chicago was packed from wall to wall. Reporters filled the front rows, their laptops open, ready to type up every moment. A steady buzz of conversation filled the air as people from all over the city showed up, not just supporters of Olivia, but regular folks who wanted to see what would happen. Even those who could not get inside crowded outside, following updates on their phones, some with homemade signs or wearing t-shirts showing their support for the cause. Curtis came in with his lawyers on either side. He tried to act like he was in control, straightening his tie and meeting people's eyes, but it was easy to tell he felt the pressure. Nothing was private anymore, and his reputation had been dragged through the mud in public. Every whisper and sidelong glance seemed to make his steps a little slower. Rachel stood up when it was time to speak. She looked the jury in the eye and started with a steady, no-nonsense voice. She made it clear that this trial was much more than just one bad incident with one officer. It was about deep-rooted problems inside the Chicago Police Department, issues that had gone overlooked for far too long. The whole room hung on her words, tense with anticipation, everyone knowing that something big might finally change. Ethan was called to the witness stand, and the whole room went silent as he walked up, his crisp blue uniform standing out among the suits. He sat down, facing the judge and the jury, glancing once at Olivia across the room as if to draw strength. Slowly and carefully, he described each instance he had seen Curtis misuse his authority. He spoke about moments in the precinct, how Curtis had threatened people, bent the rules to fit his own needs, and acted like he was untouchable. Ethan's voice was steady, but there was something heavy about each word, like he had kept these stories locked away for too long. The prosecutor let Ethan tell the story in his own words, painting a picture of what life was really like for someone working under Curtis. Every time Ethan paused, you could hear nothing but the sound of someone clearing their throat or the creak of a bench. When the defense had their turn, they tried everything to throw Ethan off. They suggested he had some kind of grudge or was looking for attention. Ethan shook his head and told them plain and simple that he was there only because it was right. That moment seemed to shift the room, giving Olivia's case more strength and leaving Curtis's lawyers scrambling. The hours after testimony felt endless. Everyone in the courtroom kept glancing at the clock as the jury disappeared into the back room, tension hanging thick in the air. Olivia, Rachel, Ethan, and Michael sat close together, hardly saying a word. The courthouse felt colder and quieter, and every time a door creaked open, people held their breath. Outside, crowds filled the steps, checking their phones for any news, some holding on to old protest signs from months before. Finally, just as the sun started dipping behind the tall buildings, the jury came back. One by one, each juror took their seat. The foreman stood and read the verdict. Curtis was found guilty on all counts. The silence of the room broke as a wave of relief swept through everyone supporting Olivia. It felt like the pressure in her chest finally lifted. Years of frustration, fear, and hard work seemed to melt away. She hugged Rachel tightly, tears running down both their faces, while Ethan closed his eyes and let the moment wash over him. Stepping outside, Olivia was surprised by the size of the crowd. When people saw her, they cheered and clapped, calling her a sign of hope. Even though she knew there was still a lot to fix, Olivia felt confident now. She understood that, with courage and people standing together, real change was possible in their city.